Welcome back. I'm so excited for this section. Why? Because we're going to start getting hands-on with one of my favorite tools in all of machine learning and data science. Now, in the past couple of sections, we've gone through this kind of workflow. We've got your computer, we set up a project folder, we created an environment with some machine learning and data science tools using Conda. Now we're going to start diving deeper into each one of these tools. And more specifically in this section, we're going to be focused on Jupyter notebooks. Now, if this diagram, this arrow pointing here, these arrows going here, you're like, what's going on here, Daniel? Don't worry, we're going to have a look at this over the next few sections. But what we're focused on for the moment are Jupyter notebooks, which is kind of like the workspace of where you work through all of your machine learning and data science projects. And now this is the workflow we're going to be using. You'll have a project folder, which we've already created. We'll have an environment, so we'll need to make sure we activate our environment so we have access to these tools. But then once we've kind of got our heads around Jupyter notebooks and these other ones, this is what it'll look like in practice. You'll have some data, you'll import it into your Jupyter notebook, and then you'll use a bunch of these tools within your environment to derive insights and gain information out of that data. But that's enough of the overview for now. Let's get hands-on and work with a Jupyter notebook. So what I'm going to do is open up Terminal. If you're on Windows, you may want to open up, I'm going to clear that so we've got a clean workspace. If you're on Windows, you may want to open up the Anaconda prompt. And now remember how I said we're going to have to activate our environment to have access to these tools? That's what we'll do first. But actually, we're going to change into our project folder. Now for me, I'm going to change to my desktop, and I've got all of my information, all of the project folders that I'm working on in the ML course folder. So we're going to go here. Mine's called sample project. Yours might be different, but I'll just show you what's in this using ls. Remember, CD stands for change directory. So now I'm in my sample project folder, and inside the sample project folder is a folder called env. Just to re-emphasize where we are, I'll go into Finder. This might be Folder Navigator on Windows or something like that. So I'm in ML course, and if I go over here, I'm in sample project. There we go, we've got env. Now what I'm going to have to do is activate this environment so I have access to all of my machine learning tools. So let's do that. Conda activate. I'm going to have to type in the file path. Yours may be different to mine depending on where your environment is stored, but that's what we covered in the last lecture, is setting up an environment and activating it. So you want to go ahead and activate that environment again. Desktop, ML course, sample project, env. So if I press enter here, you'll notice that it changes from base to having this path name activated. So now my environment is active. I should be able to start up a Jupyter notebook. Oh, we made a mistake. Notebook by typing in the command Jupyter notebook and hitting enter. What this is going to do is automatically load up your browser, your default browser, and it's going to come to the Jupyter dashboard. Very simple here. Again, this is just another view of what we can see in the sample project folder. So here we have our env folder. If we looked inside that, if we go back into Finder, we look inside env, we've got the exact same folders here. This is where we're working. Now, what should you pay attention to on this? First, we'll go back to the home section. We look here, this is showing the files that we've currently got in this folder. Remember, we're in the sample project folder. Then if you come over here, we've got a couple of buttons, upload and new. We'll have a look at those in a second. And you've got two other tabs here. Running will show you any terminals that you have running in your Jupyter interface. Notebooks will show you any notebooks that you have running. And because we have neither of these running at the moment, it says there are no terminals running and there are no notebooks running. Now clusters you don't really have to worry about. For now, I've been working on machine learning projects for the last couple of years and have never looked at the clusters tab. So we'll come back here, we'll focus on what really matters. So what are these upload and new buttons? Well, let's have a look. When we click upload, what happens? This is going to open up your folder interface. Now, what if we did want to upload something? For example, I've got a heartdisease.csv document here for the sake of this lecture, but you might have another type of data folder here. So what we can do is, if we wanted to, we can open that, and this is going to upload it to the Jupyter dashboard. But in reality, all it's actually doing is, if we come back to sample project, where we were before, now we can see we've got ENV, and heart disease, and heart disease. So realistically, this upload button is just like another form of transfer one folder to another region. So we can do that again. Let's try an image this time. And now this upload will work with any folder or any file that you want to try out. So try it out on your own. If you want a link to these resources that I'm using, will be available in the resources section. So we'll upload this image, click there. And so now if we go back to Finder, and go to where we were, sample project. So we can see now we've got the exact same thing in here. env, 6-step ML framework.png, and heartdisease.csv. Okay, and there's one more button we should pay attention to, and that's the new. We click on new, and this is the most exciting part. We can start a notebook. Now it says Python 3 because when we click on this, it's going to create a new notebook, and the notebook will be able to run Python 3 code, which is what we want, right? We want to be writing Python code. We want to be writing machine learning code. You can also create text files, create another folder if you wanted to, or create a terminal window. We won't have a look at those now because we're focused on notebooks, which is where we'll spend the majority of our time. So we click here. This will open up a new window, and here we go. The most beautiful thing in all of data science and machine learning, well, maybe aside from an algorithm that's working really well, is the Jupyter Notebook. And so again, this interface might look a bit confusing if you've never seen it before, but don't worry, we're going to go through it. To start off, up here is the title of your notebook. So maybe we call it Example Notebook. This will rename your file. And if we click this little save icon, it's gonna say that it's auto saved here, but really we click saved. But that's all right. We come back here. What do we notice? We've got example notebook.ipynb. So see what I mean? If you type in here, example notebook, let's just change this for demonstration. Example notebook 1, rename. That's going to change this name. And so if we come back to our sample project folder, you'll notice we now have example notebook.ipynb. Now, what does ipynb stand for? Well, IPython notebook, which is what Jupyter used to be called, but they've kept the file extension as this so that older versions of notebooks don't break. So wherever you see this extension, some name.ipynb, this is actually a Jupyter notebook. Now, if we check the running tab, we can see that we now have a notebook running. We don't have to pay too much attention to this shutdown button from this running tab because we can shut down our notebook elsewhere, but we'll look at that in a future video. The next thing to think about, let's rename this back to example notebook, is what is actually going on here. Now, as a quick overview, remember this is the title. This is going to be the menu bar, which is similar to what you may have seen in other applications where you've got file, edit, you've got a few different controls here. This is the toolbar, right? So these are commands that you can use on different cells, and this is a cell. The most important thing to remember about this is that this cell can contain code or markdown. Can contain other things as well, but the two main ones you'll be worried about are code and markdown. Code was what allows you to write Python code in here, and markdown allows you to write formatted text. Say if we wanted to write hello world, we're going to press shift and enter, and there we go, we've got some text there. All right, save this lecture from getting too long. We're going to have a look at different things that we can do with cells, different things that we can do with these little tools here in the next video. But the takeaway from this is that you can start a Jupyter notebook once you've got your environment activated. If your terminal window changes to something like this after you run the command Jupyter Notebook, that is completely normal. What this is saying is basically a Jupyter Notebook is running at the local host, which is on your computer. You can see here, local host. So it just means that a document is running in your browser. So keep this as it is. We'll return back in the next video to look at more controls and things we can do within Jupyter Notebooks.